I was thinking a little bit more about Matt Kahn's video on intention. And I was thinking about how he said set big intentions for mundane tasks. And I also realized in a way that the state of map consciousness is a state of a different intention completely. So what Matt Kahn's talking about is from ego consciousness setting big intentions. And I was thinking about how in map consciousness the ego is scrambled. And so there's a completely different intention there to begin with. There's different meanings, but the whole state seems to be of a different intentionality. And it could be towards being relational and being embodied as one's childlike self, because that's how we are naturally, and the ego is sort of programming that's in the way of our natural way of being. And maybe the intention is to be creative and to learn, which is beyond right and wrong, because right and wrong would mean we have to compare it to previous knowledge. And so we're always classifying and categorizing our perceptions based on previous knowledge, and the previous knowledge is what is actually what is making things salient. So we're only seeing what we previously know to be true and categorizing based on that. Whereas in map consciousness, it's a state beyond right and wrong. It's a state of always learning, and there's pretty much no time to even judge whether something is right or wrong. It's just like aha moment after aha moment. And everything that is an aha moment is seen and understood as truth for that moment in the moment. Maybe not truth ultimately in context to every single moment, but in that moment it's seen as truth, and then it's let go and the next truth comes. So it's like a state of living in truth from moment to moment. And when the ego starts to come in and try to judge and make things right or wrong, good and bad, then that moment to moment truth unfolding starts to get mixed up. And then when it gets mixed up, one starts to become in a state of confusion, which leads to fear, which leads to scary meanings and associations. And then one eventually reassociates with ego consciousness, the one that says right and wrong, good or bad. And I think too there's a difference in that when a person is in ego consciousness and making these intentions, it's still an abstraction and it's still a conceptualization. Whereas in map consciousness, it's actually a state of being, and the meaning and the intention are actually in the moment, and then they're gone. And in that way, it's always new and diverse. Whereas if we're conceptualizing and abstracting in order to make intentions and meanings, we're still distracted from the infinite unfolding of the moment. And I still feel there's value in doing that for sure. I just see that when I compare it to the space of map consciousness, when we're connecting with something of other meaning and of other intention besides the ego's desires and intentions, it's sort of like what he's talking about, but the universe is doing it for us. It's a way of being. And I still feel what he's talking about is a way of meing, even though it's giving voice to altruistic intentions, which is a good thing, because it's of a different quality than thinking about oneself. I still don't think it's good to follow anybody, really. Part of me just speaking to myself like this is perhaps giving permission for us in a way to think for ourselves about stuff, and talking about things like mania and psychosis for hours upon hours in ways that I choose to think about it and talk about it, because it's my own experience. A professional can give me a label, but it's likely that professional has never experienced this. So I'm talking about it and thinking about it and looking at it and inquiring about it and presenting different perspectives on it in ways that I choose to think about it. And I'm even using some scientific terms with my limited scientific background and reading. But if people that are professionals want to impose professional terms on my experience, then I can use professional terms to unfold and extrapolate my experience too. And it's about me creating and using language the way that I would choose to, because language is what creates our perception of reality. So if I talk to myself enough in this way, it will sink in to me. And maybe that's what Matt Kahn is talking about with the intentions, is it sinks in to one's being when one says all that stuff enough. I guess I would have to try it to see if it translates into actually being able to be that way in actuality. Because for me, all of this talking with myself is leading up to being able to embody my mania, which is a state of so many different things. It's you can't define it. I can't define it, but to me it's like hyper learning, creativity, always learning. So in a manic state, or an embodied manic state, I would always be learning. Just like when I'm talking to myself in self-dialogue, I have some stuff written down, but when I elaborate on things, most of it I just make it up on the go. So I've never actually heard that before until I say it myself. And to me, that's learning from myself. It's learning from my own perception. It's learning from my own ability to extrapolate from what I've read. It would be sort of like how a person who's a researcher might research one paper and then look in the references and then look up all the papers that led to that paper and look up all the papers that led to that paper. And each of those papers might have taken 10 years to come to. So there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours worth of intellectualization that goes into that one paper, because it's all from 100 papers leading up to this one paper. And all those papers are doing that, but we can actually do that with our own brains and be able to draw on things that we read 10 years ago but we forgot that we read, or something that we say that is completely new. Like, how many sentences do we think or say in a given day that are completely original, that we didn't get from somebody else last week? We don't come up with anything because we've been taught to just learn from other people. We don't know how to actually engage our own brains to learn. And so with me doing this, all this talking with myself, it's inviting myself to do that. And I'm surprised with some of the stuff that I've said, even though I can't remember it anyway. And I feel like I've been able to say some stuff to myself that is kind of interesting to me, that I could have been just reading books the whole time and reading interesting sentences that other people came up with, that other people took 5 years to come up with and put in a book or something. And there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of great information and ideas that people have said. But I find that now I'm in a space where I'm able to just create that with myself. It's like I'm speaking out my own book to read versus reading other people's books. And I think I really enjoy reading other people's books, but I think it's more powerful to see things for myself and say them, give voice to them, than if I was to read it from somebody else. That would be sort of like in child development, kids naturally will learn how to walk. But that would be like an adult saying, okay, well, we're going to make this kid walk. Well, it's going to happen anyways. So in that same way, I feel like just by having dialogue with myself and coming up with some of my own stuff and building on that, it's more powerful for me, though I might have been able to experience something similar by reading books. Because the thing is, with the context that I'm talking about for myself, a lot of people have been through this similar thing, and it's a similar context for a lot of people. And a lot of people might choose to write a book, but I've just chosen to do this whole self-dialogue process. And I feel like map consciousness is a state that creates context. All of this talking to myself has come out of that experience and is trying to create other context than the programming that society would have me believe. And when that gets scrambled, I'm creating other context naturally because I'm not in that. And also with what Matt Kahn said, he's saying attach big intentions to mundane tasks, like sipping water is saving the world, for example. And a person sipping water has control, and also has control over saying, when I sip water, the world is healed. Now, I've been in spaces where I don't feel like I'm in so much control, but I've also had enough so-called control to be able to set intentions or context. So if I'm feeling quite distressed, I could think that the universe is recalibrating me for the highest good, or I'm processing other information than just my own. Because if I'm in a state of distress that's greater than my current situation, it implies that I'm processing more from my past or whatever, maybe even the collective unconscious. So by thinking that, as part of the context that I've created for myself, by speaking to myself about it, I'm not going to be so afraid of it. Because if the fear comes in, then that's when other associations can start to make it spiral out of control more. And also, it's sort of like saying something along the lines of the universe is recalibrating me for my highest good, or just recalibrating me. It also states, well, this is time limited. It's not going to keep going forever. And it's also not saying, oh, this is bad and I need to stop it from happening. It's just something that's happening. So it's not really putting any kind of value on that experience. And by calling it bad and resisting it, it can actually make it worse, because we have the energy of fear and resistance going into the experience. It's sort of along the lines of, this too shall pass. Another thing with these videos too that I haven't really talked about, haven't really thought about it this way, but in a way, I'm a person diagnosed with a serious and persistent mental illness. And that sounds kind of scary, but I don't think I'm really coming across as a scary person. I hope not. And I was thinking about dissociation and how I sometimes dissociate as part of this whatever that's going on. And I was thinking that when I dissociate, I often feel like a homeless person, and in a way, my inner home is my ego self. That's how I feel at home, by being that version of myself. So when I dissociate from that, I feel homeless because I don't feel like me. I don't feel like my ego self. I'm wondering if that's because homeless people don't really have an ego self, and they feel homeless because they are homeless because they can't function because they don't have that ego self, which is the functional self. So I feel like bipolar, in a way, or at least dissociation, is like being an inner homeless person. I feel like it wouldn't take much for me to be a homeless person, I guess. Like, if my ego center detached and I dissociated from it and I wasn't able to get back to it, I don't know how I would function at all. And I might just be a homeless person wandering. And then I think about how if homeless people wandering sort of don't have that ego self, in a way, they're more sane because they don't have this functional accumulative center. I feel like they could be in a high level of consciousness, actually, but society wasn't designed for them to be in that level of consciousness. And so now they sort of appear to be these homeless people. And there's this big gap between, say, homeless people and then the people that have it all. And that needs to be closed. That gap needs to be closed. Because I feel like one day I could disconnect from that ego and be homeless, or disconnect from it and, say, have some kind of dementia, and or appear to have that, but really I'm actually quite conscious and aware inside, yet I can't actually do anything to show that I'm there. I don't know, it's a strange sensation. I feel myself simplifying my life. Like, they talk about simplify your life and why it's good and everything. But I feel like the way that this consciousness is going, it's wanting life to be simplified out of complete necessity, like it has to. For example, I have very little food in my fridge right now because it's difficult to sort of like plan meals, or I don't know, it's strange. I almost feel like I need to organize my life in such a way that it appears that I have a functional ego. But really, I would be completely lost. It would almost be like having no memory, no ability to really plan ahead. So then what would be necessary is going based on, oh, there's a sensation of hunger. That means get food. These are sort of things that are the intelligence of the body. So bodily necessities, bodily intelligence would be there, which is something that happens naturally. And I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to describe this weird sensation I've had lately, and it's almost like still having friends and meeting up with friends and things, but meeting up as a completely confused person, but not confused in a bad way. Confused in that the brain really has no motivation. Because the motivation, the desire is of the ego and of the dopamine stuff. And so what is it like to live without that? And I feel like if I was to resist that happening, I could perhaps interpret this loss of functionality in terms of the ego functionality. And some of it's necessary. I just feel like I'm losing more of it. For example, a year ago, I would have been eating lots of fruits and veggies and have all the ingredients in my fridge for salad and be ready to make a smoothie as well, stock full of veggies and fruits and everything, and now I can't even. Now if I get one thing of spinach, it goes bad because I'm not really thinking about making healthy food for myself. I can manage to do those overnight oats and then have like rice and Indian food sauce, and that's kind of it. And if I was starting, I think I've talked about it before, if I was starting to feel really unwell physically, I could probably manage to focus more on that, but it hasn't been detrimental in terms of energy and things because I have a different view on energy and how it's not necessarily from food. I think healthy food is important, but I think at a certain point it becomes less important. Like one can let go of one's attachment to healthy food. I do take some vitamins. Maybe I'll at some point stop taking those too. And I was saying how I'm having trouble focusing on certain things for work, linear tasks and things. And it could just be temporary as well. Because I do often get into a place where I'm more functional in those ways. When I think about this last number of months, I haven't gotten better with the food thing at all. I'm not sure where I'm going with that. It's something that I'm experiencing. Because I had a week or so of distress, but now that that seems to be over, I'm sort of in this space of being a bit spaced out, and I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I could make it feel bad if I resisted it and if I tried to do certain functional things that aren't really congruent with the state. I wonder what a ready position would be for random acts of kindness and synchronicity. What I mean by that is a lot of sports, they have like ready position, like when you're getting ready for a serve in tennis, or when an outfielder is getting ready for the pitch in case the ball is hit in baseball. Well, a lot of us walk around with our heads down, our sunglasses on, looking at our devices, and that's not really ready position for being relational or randomly kind. So ready position would be like eyes open, mouth corners up, and ready to look at somebody's eyes, hands out of the pocket, ready to shake someone's hand or grab the door. So I feel like there's sort of a ready position for that. And I think it's related to posture and gesture.